we'll take some time to go around the room for anybody who might want to say something to Marc. As I mentioned to Marc earlier today, giving him some warning of what we're about, I see this as being somewhat like and I'm dating myself here, the old George Burns roasts when he would get some celebrity up at the head table. Everybody would be sitting at the dinner table in some hall somewhere, and George as the host and the victim as the celebrity. Sorry, Marc, I'm thinking of you as a victim, but the celebrity, let's not call him a victim, was also at the head table. And then certain folks at the table or in the room would have an opportunity to speak to the celebrity and say nice things or whatever they thought was appropriate on the occasion. And then at some point later on in the evening, the celebrity would get his own back and would have an opportunity to take the mic and speak what he wishes. That's what I'm hoping is going to happen here this evening. Before I get any further, let's bring him up to the head table.
Hey.
Hello, Marc. Welcome, sir.
You still look young. How do you do that?
It's a lot of makeup. Can I very quickly say thank you, John, and thank you, Paul, for organizing this evening, and thank you, colleagues, those of you able to make it. I did a quick scan of all the faces at the top of the screen, and I'm very touched that you have devoted some of your time this evening to join for this event. Merci à tout le monde. Je suis très ému que vous soyez ici ce soir, et puis j'ai vraiment hâte d'entendre vos anecdotes et vos questions. So really looking forward to getting into the meat of it, John, and I'm ready for questions.
Well, it might be more than questions, Marc, so I think maybe you might have thought about reserving your thanks until later on in the meeting, but we'll see how it turns out. How about, first of all, has anybody got anything that they want to say to Marc at this point? A la George Burns roast or otherwise. Be sincere, be heartfelt, or let him have it. What do you think, guys?
Yeah, no, Marc, it's great to see you again, man, and really appreciate the opportunity, John and Paul, to do this thing. And anyway, I'd like just to relay this particular situation that happened to me. I was on exchange posting down in Pennsylvania, and back in between 1984 and 87. And this particular time was a pretty special time that I was busy with projects with the replacement of the American Sea helicopter on staff there. But anyway, Marc was heading towards this opportunity. And my sister was coming down from Prince George to join and be with us and spend some time. And instead of picking her up and going to our house, I said, we're going south. And we picked her up at like 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and we drove nonstop all night long, got down to Florida, pulled into the parking lot there. One of the staff from Nassau saw our license plate, came over, gave us a pass to get into one of the other viewing compounds. And so we were there for this morning launch, and it was the most spectacular, most emotional experience I think I've ever had. Just the power and the thrust of this and you, Marc, doing this amazing thing for Canada, for our class, for everything, and for you. So thanks for making an unbelievably special moment for me and my family and for all of Canada. Thanks, man.
Well, thank you very much, Grant. I did not know that you took all that trouble to come down to see the launch. I'm certainly glad we left on time. We did. I was very fortunate in all my flights to leave on time, and I couldn't agree with you more about what kind of a sight it is to watch it, because I've watched many from the ground. It's a very powerful experience. But I'm very touched that you took the time to come down and since you told that anecdote, I have to ask you, because I've been wondering for the past 54 years, whatever happened to that Austin Healey 3000 that you were working on?
Well, Mr. Healy eventually I was going to sea, and the salt air out behind the mess at Shearwater at the wardroom there was not very kind. And it gradually deteriorated until I sold it to another chap for $400. I saw one online for $100,000 in the States. So I guess I didn't do too well on the exchange.
Well, you certainly gave it a lot of love. I remember that very well at RMC.
Yeah, that was special. Thanks.
Thanks, Grant. Don Carr. Hello, Don. Welcome.
Hi, Mark. Mark and I were at CMR in our prep year 65, 66. Mark, you may recall you were an athlete in those days, not known for football at that point in prep year, but certainly for swimming and water polo. In fact, I was just looking at a clipping that I kept from school days, and we were playing at Palais National in Montreal, and you scored 2 of CMR's goals in that game. So your legend and legacy for athletics started right in prep year. Great to be here, Mark.
Thanks very much, Don. I definitely remember you and I being on the water polo team at CMR. That was a great sport, and not a great spectator sport, but certainly one we loved a lot.
Bob Mitchell.
Yeah, yeah, and just through the vagaries of postings. I think the last time I saw Mark was when we were both in London doing post grad, and our paths haven't crossed since then. We worked closely together as CWC and CSL, and that was support that I got from Mark throughout that time was excellent. But it just the vagaries of time, unless he flew over me when he was when I was in Perth. That's we haven't had a face-to-face really since graduation. So congratulations, Mark. Enjoy the day.
Thanks very much, Bob. I certainly remember you being in the CWC very well, and I think 1970 was a great year. And then I heard that you had disappeared to Australia, a place I flew over, as you say, many times. You know, the South Hemisphere is pretty empty, so not much land, but going over Australia was one of the highlights.
Salut, Marc. Félicitations. Nous, je pense qu'on s'est vus à plusieurs reprises. Le fait que j'ai travaillé une dizaine d'années à l'Agence spatiale, je t'ai rencontré comme astronaute. Je t'ai jamais rencontré comme ministre, mais on a passé nos 5 années de collège ensemble au CMR. Je me souviens, entre autres, tu vas dire c'est du vieux, mais la fois qu'on a fait du pouce en 67 en revenant de notre entraînement d'été à Squires, we came back to Montreal, and as the college was paying for the closest site to CMR for our comeback, we ended up at Montreal, the train station, with only our kit bag. And Mark and I, we had to come back to Quebec City. And it was about midnight or 2 o'clock in the morning. I don't remember exactly. But we were on the 20 doing some eye-checking to come back to Quebec City. So that's one of the moments that I do remember a lot.
Merci beaucoup, Serge. You know, I think all of us who are here tonight remember 2 people in particular from our time at military college, and that's the person in front of us and the person behind us in all those inoculation parades and all those other parades that we had to go to in the early days. And so I had Sherm Embry in front of me and Serge Gaudreau behind me. So I became friends with Serge. Of course, our lockers were right beside each other, and he's a Quebec City boy like me. So we've known each other for many, many years.
Yvon de Blois.
Un plaisir de te revoir, Marc. On ne s'est pas rencontrés souvent dans les 50 dernières années. J'espère... alors, félicitations. J'espère que cette soirée va être digne de tout ce que tu as accompli. Et puis, continuer à avoir bonne chance. Alors, merci, Marc.
Merci, Yvon.
John Lutes.
Hello, Mark.
Hi, John.
I was thinking back about well, most of it was from second year at CMR and Champlain Squadron. Seems to me we spent a lot of time on the parade square there. And also thinking back to football, and I'm just looking at the picture there of you between Novitsky and McCartney. Good times, lots of memories.
Yeah, I loved my football days and with some great people. Sadly, some not with us anymore.
Brian Hope.
But Mark, I just wanted to say that Bonnie and I were married in August 1970, and you were invited but couldn't make it to the wedding because you were somewhere in the Atlantic. But you gave us a gift, which was a globe over the world. It was been sitting on a table in our house for a long time. And when you were selected to go into space, I kept, every time I passed that globe, which I did every day, I'd think, what did he know back in 1970 that he would be going around this globe? So that was very fond memory that we had from right from the start, and we really enjoyed the fact that you were going around this globe in our room.
Thanks very much, Brian. Glad you held on to that globe, and I remember that time very, very well. You're right. I was on the Pickle coming back from Europe on the sailboat, and so I missed your wedding.
Thanks,
well,
Brian.
we remember your gift very well. Thank you again.
Thank you,
Randy Palmer.
I've run into Marc off and on since college periodically, but not so much in the last 20 years. But every time I seemed to, was congratulating him on something other accomplishment. I congratulate you from finally retiring. So God knows what you would have come if you hadn't. But I still go back to the university days because Marc and I were both swimmers and on the water polo team. That's where my fondest memories are of Marc still. He was a breaststroker like me, and quite competitive, I remember. But a little bit. What really surprised me was on the water polo team. One trip in Ottawa, we were playing a team from East European, one of the Eastern European countries. I can't remember which. And we were getting badly beaten. And so after the game, in the evening, before games the next day, Marc gathered us all together and lambasted us all for not being aggressive enough. And the words he really said is, you needed to be dirty, just like our football player team is. I never forgot those words. So
sorry, I was a bit competitive in those days. Nice to see you, Randy.
Thank you, Randy. I thought there might be somebody from the water polo team to do this. There's some other small groups, one of which is Edge Fizz that include Marc. I think we've got some Edge Fizz folks here, so we'll get to them in a second. Yes. Rem Westland.
I'm sitting here in Kingston, and reception is not all that good, so I'll be quick about it. Also water polo, and the memory I'll share, Marc. We used to do that circuit training, which was damn hard when you'd go from one spot to the next, and you'd exercise still harder. When we were done, my pulse was about 160, and you came in at about 80. And I can remember thinking, that guy's got fitness just built in the bone. Good to see you. And John, thanks for doing this.
Thank you, Ren.
Gosh, I'm very touched by all the my ex water polo colleagues from those days. And for those who don't know water polo, because Randy talked about how dirty it was, 95% of it happened below the water, in case you didn't know.
Billy Simmons.
Hi, Billy.
I had the pleasure of serving as a CSL with Marc. We'd have meetings, or Bob Mitchell would call meetings. And Mitchell and Laidler would show up dressed to the nines, spiffy. And Marc would always show up in this house coat and slippers. and I think you must have used the same fashion consultant as Novitsky. Because you guys were a pair, let's say. I got a little story that probably nobody else knows but me. Your first launch, Marc, I was in Sweden in a bar. And one or two of the Vattenfalls people were with us. And mention was made of you as a Canadian on the launch. And one of these guys turned to me and says, how in hell does a Canadian get onto a shuttle? And I answered as simply, and I kind of remember the simple answer I gave him. It takes talent. You still got it, bud.
Oh, thank you very much.
Still applies. And thank you for being a great colleague, teammate and friend that you are to me and to all of us.
Thanks very much, Billy. I didn't know that that story. Thank you for sharing it with me, and I remember our time together so well as CSLs and teammates as well. Yeah.
Thanks, Billy. Okay, somebody who's still got his roots well into RMC, Les Bennett. Here you are, Les. Good evening,
sir. Sorry, I was late joining you. I guess the last time I met you, you were in the college. The whole college was out there listening to your talk, and you came over and I stood up and chatted, and my son was with me. I can't remember his age, but he was quite small, and you were quite gracious to shake his hand, I think, and chat with him a little bit. And I also remember you were not going anywhere specifically in the next little while, and I'd suggested that coming to RMC to teach would be very welcome. Of course, that didn't work out, and you moved on to much higher and better things. But I guess that was the last time I chatted with you, and it's nice to see you tonight. So thanks for coming on.
Well, thank you very much, Les. Nice to see you again. And I do remember that time I went to RMC, and teaching is something that I think is very rewarding, and it could have been a potential option, but other things took me the other way.
Certainly. Well, you've done well overall.
Thank you.
Thank you, Les. Mark, have you noticed how gentle everybody has been?
It's been very nice. When are the hard knocks going to come?
I don't know. I thought there might be somebody that had their hello, Gerard. You're waving your finger there or waving your hand. Let's go for you, sir.
You want this is a roast, right?
Yes, go for it, buddy. Well done.
So I've known Mark since we went to different high schools in Quebec City at the same time, and we were PMQ brats in Valcartier together.
Oh boy.
And anyway, I would say to Billy Simmons when he was asked, "How does a Canadian get on the shuttle?" What Billy should have said, well, he said, like everybody else, he takes the elevator. My story, Mark and I went to, we grew up in Quebec City, obviously, and in Valcartier, and we also were neighbors in Staff College in Toronto. He lived just around the corner in one of the old ghetto townhouses that we all rented in those days.
Yeah.
But my story goes to grad week. And I'm sure Mark will remember grad week. I was his DCSL for the last term. And as DCSL on grad parade, all you have to do is tie a rope to the guy in front of you and follow the parade. And when he moves, you move. And when he does salutes, you salute. But on Thursday, I think it was Thursday, and grad parade, I think, was Saturday. On Thursday, Mark comes down sick with food poisoning. And here I was partying like a rock star with CC Squires for 4 days. And I was advised on Thursday that I would be leading 2 Squadron on the grad parade because Mark was in hospital with food poisoning. And I will never forgive you for that, Mark, because I had to sober up, and I had to sober up and learn all of the movements and practice for 2 hard days before grad parade. But on a serious note, it was probably one of the most exciting achievements of my college career, being on grad parade and leading 2 Squadron around the parade square, apart from playing football with you, of course. So my thanks go out to you for getting sick at the right time.
Thank you very much. I was hoping nobody would remember that particular week. I think it was the toga party. That's when I came down with this violent gastroenteritis. And you're right, I didn't make the parade. And thank you for taking my place on parade day. Although they did let me march off the parade at the very end. I just didn't have to sweat it out on the parade square for an hour like you did.
Okay, André.
Oui. Bonjour tout le monde. Salut Marc.
Salut André.
Je devrais te connaître plus que ça parce qu'on était dans la marine tous les deux. Puis moi aussi, je viens de la région de Québec. Mais on ne s'est pas connus tant que ça au collège. La seule chose que je me souviens, there's one thing that I remember, I envied him a lot. I thought he was a lucky guy because his father was a colonel in the Vandals, if I remember correctly.
Yep.
And he had been military attaché in Yugoslavia also. So I was looking, I said, this guy's really lucky. I hope I can be as lucky as he is. So I don't have any anecdotes. We met a few times, I think, at reunions over the years, but I followed your career. Je te félicite pour tout ce que tu as fait, beaucoup plus que moi. Alors, j'ai hâte d'entendre un peu ton histoire que tu vas nous raconter. Salut.
Merci beaucoup, André. Oui, tu as raison. Mon père était dans le Royal 22e Régiment. La référence de Gerard au camp Valcartier, j'ai passé pas mal de temps là parce qu'il était commandant du 3e bataillon à un moment donné. Et puis, et oui, il est allé en Yougoslavie comme attaché militaire.
Okay, we mentioned that there's some Eng Fizz guys here. Here's one of them, Dave Green.
Oh, thanks, Sean. That was kind of ironic because Mark and I just had lunch a couple of weeks ago after not seeing each other for 40 years or something. I think the connection that I think of is the connection through engineering physics. I was pretty competitive in the academic world, and to be honest, I didn't really notice Mark as the competitor. I thought of John Cross. So I think even John Hills, I was warned coming from Royal Roads might beat me, but I didn't hear about Marc Garneau. And talking to him, I asked sort of what his background was like. And I think, Mark, you said your first year you ranked where?
Very badly.
Something like 162nd or something.
160 in my Christmas term, first year as a recruit at CMR, because at CMR they posted your rank. I was 162nd out of 180.
So starting from a low point, yeah. So then we both got Athlone fellowships at the same time in fourth year, and we both went on to PhDs. But you did it in half the time that I did, and from a much more respected university in something much more interesting. What was it again?
Well, it was the visual perception of the human face.
Very interesting. So I congratulate you on that rapid ascent and passing me at somewhere around the Athlone Fellowship. Me twice as long as you to get a PhD. So congratulations on being very smart and being able to pull yourself up from 162nd to top of the class.
Well, Dave, there should be no doubt in your mind that when I was in Eng Fizz with you, as far as I was concerned, the two brains in Eng Fizz, and I think there were about 8 of us who were in Eng Fizz, were you and John Kroll, and I couldn't catch up to either of you. That's the truth.
Okay, Bas Wheeler. Good evening, sir.
Hi, guys, and hi, Mark.
Hi, Bas.
You just reminded me, you were 167th. I was 148th. And I didn't realize that you were behind me. Most of you know I played a little hockey at CMR, and that was all that kept me from getting booted out at that time. They gave me until Christmas to pull up my socks. And as far as you go, and Grant, I think, mentioned your nickname of Sloth. And I do have to say that most of us have been surprised at how you've exceeded the very low standards you set for yourself at the time. I followed your career with great interest, and looking forward to hopefully seeing you at our reunion in 2025.
Thanks very much, Bas. I will be there for sure. I will be there for sure. And by the way, you know, I mean, when I think of Bas Wheeler, I think hockey. You were definitely are one of our hockey stars. And you know, I have an excuse why I came 162nd out of 180, because we all have excuses. One is because, like many of my colleagues at CMR, I don't know how you guys were at Rhodes and RMC, but at CMR, I slept through half my morning classes. I was so exhausted all the time. And, we used to use those Astracans, put our gloves in them and use them as a pillow and just go to sleep on our desks. We were so darn tired. I was one of the top 10 circle runners that year, and that's not something I'm very proud of. But it was tough. It was tough, and I'm glad that I was able to hang in there.
Rick Lancaster.
Well, it's wonderful to be here with everybody, especially you, Mark. My situation is that I hardly know Mark at all. My situation is one of admiration from a distance. I've watched your entire career with great interest and, again, admiration. And it's just a privilege to be here. I will look forward to shaking your hand next year, 2025. But thanks for participating tonight. I hope you get roasted a little bit more than we've seen so far. But Mark, I admire you that much. It's a pleasure.
Well, thank you very much, Rick. Those are very kind remarks. And I certainly remember you from the college days, although our paths didn't cross very much.
Yeah.
Okay. Trolling for a roast. We might find one here. Cliff Squires. Cliff, you've got... We're going to keep you to 10 minutes, Cliff.
Oh, okay. Well,
some people in the East want to go to bed.
I'll be very brief. Fact is, somewhat like Rick Lancaster, I really didn't know Mark all that well. We certainly moved in different circles. He was sort of, among the good cadets, and I was at the Manor. I was just funny, talking about those marks. They posted them at Royal Roads as well. And one of my friends in first year was a guy named Robert Scott Smart. And when they posted the marks at Christmas, I can't remember the total number. I think it was 167. Whatever the number was, Scott Smart was 167 out of 167.
Not so.
He ended up having a fine teaching career in a small town in Manitoba. But anyway, my knowledge of Mark mostly comes from being in third and fourth year, developing a pretty good friendship with Bob Novitsky, who unfortunately, of course, is not here. He would be able to roast the hell out of Mark.
Yeah.
Because I believe he and Mark were, if not absolute best friends, certainly very, very, very close friends all through military college. I wouldn't be surprised if Bob wasn't the guy who named him Sloth. If you want to look at people who are close friends in our class, you look at who wrote each other's biographies. And if you look at Mark's, it was written by Bob Novitsky. And if you look at Novitsky's, it was written by Mark. So having said that, when I was working at Bristow, Mark was already up in the stratosphere with the National Space Agency, I guess. I'm not sure what actually his position was, but in any case, they came to Bristol Aerospace in Winnipeg on a tour. And to my great surprise, Mark knew I worked there, and I was, certainly wasn't at the head of the company or anything. I was in the middle heap somewhere. But Mark knew I worked there and asked and mentioned it to, the president, whoever was touring him around, and had them bring him over to my little cubicle. And I was shocked, and I'll never forget that, Mark. I was so impressed that you would think of the fact that I was there. It was just kind of, I think, exemplary of the kind of person you are. So that's not a roast. I guess that's the opposite of a roast. But I really don't have anything bad to say about you. Now, Novitsky told me a lot of bad stories about you, but I can't remember any of them in enough detail to provide. So we're sadly missing having our good friend Bob here. But again, I wanted to say, as many people have, congratulations on what you've done and how you've been a model of our class, I guess, and fantastic job, and look forward to seeing you next year if all goes well. And thanks, John, for putting this together.
All right, Cliffy. Thanks, buddy.
Thanks very much, Cliff. And I do remember going out to Winnipeg, Bristol Aerospace, and also there was Magellan there, and in the space world. And I do remember meeting you back then. And I'm glad you brought up the Manor, because I did actually go to the Manor. You know, you said I was one of the good guys, but I did go to the Manor. I just want you to know that. And since so many people have mentioned my nickname, Sloth. You're right, Cliff. It was Bob Novitsky, who is a dear friend of mine, who gave me that. And in case anybody is curious to why, I have to say that the mists of time have shrouded the reason in my head. I can't remember why he called me a sloth. It was obviously because I displayed slothful behavior at some point, but I can't remember the specific incident. But yeah, he's the one who named me Sloth.
Thank you, Cliff.
Excellent.
Okay, I haven't exactly been overrun by submissions of proposed inscriptions for your plaque, Mark, but somebody did do a bang-up job of it. I'm going to bring him here. Jim Harris. Hi, Jim.
Well, my time in the Navy was probably the time I should have been seeing a lot of Mark, but of course he was off to other things most of the time. I was my biggest thing was being CISO at NEUA for a while, and hobnobbing with all the ship's captains and what have you. But the first time I really met Mark, of course, being from Rhodes, I was on remedial swimming, and now I can say that our astronaut, the future astronaut at the time, taught me remedial swimming. Quite a leg kick you had, Mark. But the thing is that now up to the present, you really did inspire my son, Sean. He took engineering, was always interested in space. He'd been working with a company that makes mass spectrometers for less than a while, but just last month, he joined the MDA in Brampton, working on the armaments program. So hopefully that works out for him. But you inspired him. He ended up getting an engineering degree at Queen's and a master's of systems engineering, something like that, that he worked on his own. So that's right up to date now that he's on that program. So you definitely inspired my family. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah. I don't think
okay, so here you go, Jim.
Wow.
Okay, well, this was a somewhat serious attempt at an inscription. Truth, Duty, Valor, and Beyond. And the other one's Veritas Officium Veritas Ultra, if you want it in Latin. And my French translation there, Veritas Devoir, Valiance et Pas-delà. So that's my first attempt. I had a couple of others. I don't know if you could. Yeah. So this one here is just a lighter attempt, which is through the bull to the stars and back again. Portara ad astra et interim. So you might want to use that too.
And one more.
Oh, yeah, this was a lighter attempt. Through the system to the stars and back. So I think those are your three big careers. You went through RMC, you went to the stars, and then you went through the system again at a higher level.
Okay, was that last one what you referred to as the bull?
The bull,
the
yeah.
Last part?
Well, you could put in Taurus Kaka, but I didn't put the Kaka in.
Well, thank you very much, Jimmy, and glad to hear your son's doing so well. It sounds like he's at the MDA location where they're working on the Artemis program for robotics for the Lunar Gateway. So it sounds exciting.
Okay, I think we're down to about 4 or 5 or 6 of us left, one of whom is another of your Eng Phys buddies, Mark, Steve Ferguson. Good evening, Steve.
Hello. Yes. Hi. Hi, Mark.
Hi,
Hi,
Steve.
For ages, it seems. Yeah. Anyway, yeah. In terms of our time together, I think really our paths mainly crossed the Eng Phys classes. Maybe not the one where everybody skipped the class and we got sent before the director of cadets. I don't know if you remember that one. I think only one person or maybe nobody showed up at some physics class, and the prof complained, and so we all got, on parade in front of the director of cadets for shit kicking. So I don't remember if you were part of that, whatever, sleep in or what. But anyway, yeah, and the other thing was, of course, I guess we were lab partners in one of the physics labs in last year, fourth year. And anyway, no, I followed your career with interest and envy. I certainly envied you when you became an astronaut, because I'd actually applied for the program myself. I got through a couple of the phases, I guess.
Well, thank you very much, Steve. And for everybody's benefit, I was very lucky to be a lab partner with Steve. He was a really, really sharp guy. And I remember one day you probably don't remember this, Steve, but I had a transistor radio, and the volume couldn't go above a certain level. And I couldn't figure out what was wrong with it. But I brought it to you, and you opened it up, and you identified a faulty transistor, and you replaced it, and my radio started working again. So you were not only good theoretically, you were good in terms of identifying problems and solving them.
Okay, thanks for that. I don't actually remember your radio. I do remember doing a few sort of jobs like that at RMC, but anyway, I'm glad it worked.
Mike Chreptyk. Good evening, sir.
I got two comments also. One for now and one for later. Hello, Mark. Good to see you, man.
Good to see you, Mike.
I got to know Mark along with Bob Novitsky back in the fourth year because we were all playing football together. And when you look at it, there's Mark, a French Canadian. There's Bob, a Polish Canadian, and there was Mike, a Ukrainian Canadian. Classic example of diversity in Canada, living the good life in fourth year RMC. The second point we'll talk about later on after when everybody's finished.
Good to see you again, Mike. And I don't know if your next point is what I'm going to talk about now, but we played football together, but we also had that memorable trip out west when the three of us who owned this, I think it was a Ford Fairlane. We paid $150 for it, and after the end of the year, the three of us got in it and drove all the way to Winnipeg. And we stayed with you, and we went up to Winnipeg Beach, where Bob and I helped as barman for a wedding of a relative of yours. And I remember that trip very well because we drove all the way to Detroit, across to Chicago, up through Minnesota. And when we reached the border, just before we reached the Manitoba border, we got a flat tire. And we I don't know what we did. We drew straws, but whatever it is, you lost, and you had to go and find a spare tires so we could continue our trip. I remember that very well. Good to see you again.
Well, yeah, the facts were there were three of us. We were in Manitoba in the middle of nowhere. The tire goes flat. There's three of us. The vote was 2 out of 3 that I was, because I was Manitoban, that I was going to go and get the tire fixed. That's why I went.
Was that the way? Okay.
That's the way it went. Anyways, but luckily there were friendly Manitobans around to help us. Yeah, the other thing about that wedding, it was my niece, and it was a Ukrainian wedding. It was just by chance that it happened when we were there. And I got to say to everybody here is that, so there was Mark, there's Bob, and myself. So we go to this wedding, and this is serious. Bob and Mark volunteered because there was an open bar, and in those weddings, like a Ukrainian wedding, it's hard liquor. So Bob and Mark go and volunteer to be bartenders, and all I saw them during the whole night, they were sitting there smiling away, laughing, and I didn't know whether or not they were smiling because they were serving so many people or they were drinking so much. But anyways, we survived Winnipeg Beach, and then we went on to the West Coast because you guys were out on Phase 4 training at Esquimalt. Yeah, that's good.
Okay, Mike Newson. Good evening, sir.
Good evening. Well, I didn't play football, and I can't swim. Wasn't smart enough to be Eng Phys. So we didn't have a lot of time with Mark, but I knew who he was, and I've respected his career the whole time. But I did have a 1960-ish Volkswagen Beetle that all you guys, and I was a reservist, as some of you may remember, and all you guys that were going to get the big bucks of being a sub-lieutenant or whatever, and bought the Mustangs and all those fancy cars. And when they broke down, you borrowed my 1960-ish Volkswagen Beetle. But anyways, back to Mark. Both our parents were working in Europe, and we went there for Christmas. This would be fourth year. And we happened to come back to Trenton on the same military flip. And my supercar was waiting at the airport. So Mark and I drove back to Kingston together in this old Beetle with no heater, and it was like 80 below. And anyways, that was a very fond memory of my time with Mark.
Thanks very much, Mike. And I had the pleasure of seeing Mike and Dave Green a few weeks ago in Victoria. Nice to see you after all these years. And you must have had an influence on me, because the very first brand new car that I bought, and I had it for 11 years, was a Volkswagen Beetle. So
perfect. Dirwyn Hayes. Hi, Dirwyn.
Hi, Mark. Good to see you.
Hi, Dirwyn.
It's we first met back in the football field as well in '68 when we came to RMC, and I think the last time we saw each other was in Lar after your trip in space, and you came over and gave a very good brief to the Canadians that were there, and you did a great job articulating your time and space that even I could understand as an artsman. So it was indeed a privilege to be able to call you a classmate as well, a friend. Good to see you, Mark. Well done.
Thanks very much, Dirwyn. I remember it very well, going to Lar after my flight, and I was very well received over there.
Jeff Holt.
Hi, Jeff.
Hey, Mark. Being an Army guy, Civ-Eng, I barely survived recruit water polo, although my son did do water polo when he was at RMC. We didn't have an awful lot of contact at RMC, but I do remember very fondly just a good evening at I think it was the Prince George bar, one of the 5-year reunions, and I don't know if it was 10 or 15, and we had a chat there, and that sticks in my mind among some good conversations. So always been a pleasure when I've met you, when I've talked to you over the years, although it hasn't been too often. What I have done is shamelessly, when people say, you want to know about me, I can say, well, one of my classmates is Marc Garneau. I got to tell you, that's worth a lot. You can brag about I went to this university and I graduated in this year. Well, we just say, my classmate, Marc Garneau. So I've used that shamelessly at times. Just wanted to let you know. So thanks very much for everything, for being who you are. And I mean, our whole class, I feel a privilege and a joy to belong. And Mark, yours is the name that I drop. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Jeff. That's very kind of you. Thank you.
Dave Pelly. Good evening, sir.
Yeah, it's not for me to talk much here. I just want to reflect everybody else's sense of admiration and pride in knowing you, Mark. And we've crossed paths a little bit here and there, but it's not about the depth of connection here. I think every single one of us here and the rest of the class who isn't here are all very pride is really the only word I can find to express how we feel about the connection that we enjoy with you. So thanks very much for being the person you are, and lots of these stories have reflected exactly what that person is, and it's a joy to hear.
Well, thanks very much, Dave, and we're all very proud of you too, of course, with your important work in the North, and so it's I really enjoyed your presentation some time ago, and good to see you again.
Here's another Dave Jurkowski. Hi, Dave.
Hey, Mark.
Dave. Hey, good to see you, Dave.
Yeah, good to see you too, and let me congratulate you amongst the many other congratulations for finding yourself on that wall. We never, well, first of all, as Newson said, I'm in the same boat. There was no way I would be Eng Phys. In fact, I took a deferred pass from the class of '69, as you probably know, went Mech Eng, but I really enjoyed this course, and I enjoyed our year. And we didn't get a chance to do too much together. I certainly didn't live in the basement of a boat under a chimney in the Royal Canadian Navy. But I know a lot more about you from John Kroll, with you in his backseat doing incessant negative G so you could feel what flotation is all about. I admire what you've done at RMC and also as an astronaut. In fact, I thought I was going to be an astronaut because my teachers kept on telling me I took up space in school. But I never got a chance to do that. But I do recall you were kind enough to come to Cold Lake, Alberta, the Paris of the North, to speak to my wing. And it was very inspirational and a very welcomed presentation that you delivered at that time. So that to say, I'm proud to be a member of this class, and I must say I probably drop your name on occasion as well, Mark. So congratulations.
Well, thank you very much, Dave. You've also had a very distinguished career in the Air Force, so congratulations to you. And you mentioned John Kroll, of course. John and I go all the way back to '65 at CMR, and I mentioned how bright he was. I remember whenever I couldn't figure out a math problem, I would go down the hall to see John, and he would just in the most logical way explain it. He was not only bright, he was also very good at explaining things. And yes, he flew me many times in a T-33 to experience weightlessness. But great to see you again, Dave. And I do remember Cold Lake very much coming out there, and it was for a Navy guy a chance to see how the Air Force worked.
Oh, Paul Corriveau.
You remember the expression "être dans la lune"?
Yes, definitely.
I think in the English they use daydreaming or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I have been many times in the Lune when I was at the college, sleeping on my bench or thinking of something else. But you were fortunate to be close to it. Can you express what's the feeling? What did you feel when you first went around?
Yeah, it's something I've been trying to describe, not always finding the right words, really for the past 40 years. But it is an extraordinary experience orbiting Earth. I have not been to the moon, but hopefully our Canadian Jeremy Hansen will do that in the next year or two. But it's an extraordinary experience because it changes the way you see things, not in a dramatic fashion, but the opportunity to look down, to gaze down at Earth as you're orbiting it. And it's a quick trip. It's 90 minutes to go around the Earth. So you go around the Earth 16 times a day, and you see different parts of it because it's rotating underneath you, as we know. And seeing the Earth and surrounded by the blackness of space, you begin to view life on Earth in a different way. You know, when we're down on Earth, we live in a circle that's about 10 kilometers around us, and that's our world, and we move around a bit with it, but it's still our world. When you go around the Earth every 90 minutes, you begin to think in a different way because of that unique perspective, and you begin to focus on the issues that are more global. Environment, for example, climate change, the fragility of that atmosphere that allows life to go on. You see the effects that we are having as humans on the planet in terms of damaging it. It's still an exquisitely beautiful planet, but there are visible signs that we are damaging our planet, and you begin to think about the importance of taking care of it because we have nowhere else to go. And so those things are driven home to you. And you also realize, and we are all ex-military, that unfortunately there are conflicts going on the surface of the planet because we seem to still have challenges in finding ways to get along with each other. And yet we all share this planet together. So your thinking changes, at least during the time you're up there, and I would say in the long term as well. You're not quite as focused on local problems as you might have been had you not had this opportunity to go into space. And I found that stayed with me with my two other missions as well, and even more so. So I tend to think about the importance of global challenges that face humanity more so than perhaps the local issues that you know, we all face in our neighborhoods, in our cities, in our provinces. So that's one thing. And of course, the other part of the experience is the magic of floating. Those who are in the Air Force probably may have had the opportunity on occasion to experience some weightlessness in airplanes, but when you're in a vehicle like the space shuttle, the orbiter, you're free falling with the orbiter for the whole time you're up there. So you're essentially floating. And that is something that sort of brings back the child in you. You know, we all grew up as children with a vivid imagination, and we saw it in our own children and perhaps our grandchildren. But as we grew up and became adults, our teachers and our parents told us, no, you have to learn to work in the real world. And of course, people can't float and they can't do certain things. And so I think that sort of makes us lose some of that imagination that we had as kids when anything was possible. Well, guess what? You can float in space. And so it sort of rekindles that childhood imagination and that sort of wonder that perhaps we tend to lose as we grow up. And so those are the two really beautiful things about having that privilege of going into space, is that perspective of our planet, and also the sheer joy, the ecstasy of being able to do things that you can't do on the Earth. So I try to convey that to people, and sometimes I find the words, sometimes I have trouble finding the words.
Okay, thank you, Paul, and thank you, Mark. So I tell you what, before we get to some Q&A, there's one guy you haven't heard from yet, Mark, and that's me. I think,
all right.
I think people have been very, very, very gentle with you. It's a little bit to my surprise, but I suppose that's appropriate. It's not that I'm going to be hard-nosed, but the nature of a roast, as I recall them watching them on television all those years ago, was people would say things to the famous person at the head stage, and amongst things would happen is that the camera would sort of pan over to the celebrity, and watching the grimaces and what have you on their face as things were said. So I'm going to keep you on the screen here so we can watch you over the next 3 minutes. And it's not about what I'm going to say. It's hopefully what I'm going to be able to achieve with my technology here. But before I do a little bit of a background, I was in touch with Mark a couple of 3 days ago, and I asked him a kind of a cryptic question. I just said, do you have any particular favorite genres of music? And I was hoping that Mark would come back with something like folk music or country or reggae or something you could sing along with. But Mark came back. What I was really hoping, he was gonna tell me he was really a Taylor Swift fan. But instead, what Mark came back with, he said, well, he likes all music, and that's what I'm going to rely on now. But he did say that he particularly likes and loves jazz and classical. Well, I didn't think jazz and classical were all that appropriate to sing along with. So I've gone back to the Taylor Swift approach. I've been in touch with I was in touch with Taylor. Yeah, we are on a first-name basis, and asked if she could record a music video for you, Mark. But apparently she's on vacation and she's not able to do that. But she did send me off to some of her people and to prepare something for you. And just 1 second here, I get myself ready. It's a little ditty. It's not meant to be artistic. It's not even meant to be good. I'm sure it's neither of those things, You don't need to look too closely, Mark. We're going to get it on full screen in a second. It's just meant to entertain and amuse, and I hope it does exactly that. So let's go for it.
In the halls of RMC, where youth was our decree, stood a man named Marc Garneau, as ambitious as could be, a naval officer in the making, with a spirit wild and free. We shared our dreams under the maple tree. Oh, Marc Garneau, your time has come, your name to claim on the RMC Wall of Fame.
Yes, that is Taylor.
Marc Garneau, the astronaut, making history in the vast expanse of space. You soared with glee, a testament to your courage and tenacity. Oh, Marc Garneau, your time has come, your name to claim on the RMC Wall of Fame. Your name from the stars to the political game. Marc Garneau, you've earned your fame. Marc Garneau, you've earned your fame. From the cosmos to the comments, a new path you did weave. Marc Garneau, the politician, tricks up his sleeve, a cabinet minister with a vision to achieve, guiding our nation in what we could believe. So here's to Marc Garneau, a life of purpose and aim. From RMC to the stars, a political game.
Okay, this is your time, everybody. Last chorus, we all sing along. Well, there you go.
Good.
There you go. Okay, now I think it might be
Can I say something?
Yeah, this is your time, Mark. I'm just going to say it's appropriate for you to say something in return for all that you've heard. Go for it. You're going to be front and center.
First of all, I was very moved by that. Thank you very much, John. And I didn't realize Taylor sang so well. It's the first time I've heard her. And my granddaughter's she's even got Taylor Swift tickets. She's crazy about Taylor Swift, but I didn't know she sang so well. And so thank you, Taylor, for agreeing to do this.
I'll pass on your good wishes.
I never thought that the two words Marc Garneau would ever, which is a mouthful, would ever end up in a song. That's for sure. Well, thank you all for your generous comments tonight, and nice to see every one of you, and to go on a little trip down memory lane in many cases. So I'm very moved by this tribute that you've given me, and it's just so nice to be with you.
So, folks, anybody got a question or two for Mark? Mike Newson.
Mark, do you keep in contact with your fellow astronauts?
Yes, I do, but not on a regular basis. It's sort of every once in a while I'll write to one of them and ask them how they're doing, or there'll be something that will be in the news that will remind me of them. But it's a very informal thing. There is actually an association of space explorers, which is all the astronauts going all the way back to the beginning. That does get together once a year in different parts of the world. It includes Russian cosmonauts and European and Japanese and Canadians. And once in a while, I'll go to one of those, but not every year.
Anybody else?
I have a question.
And who's that?
David Jurkowski.
David. Okay, go ahead, and I'll try and find
Just
you. Dave.
Thank you. Kind of a general question. Your take on commercial space. It seems to be taking over what NASA is doing, but I doubt that very much. Is there much, I guess, collaboration, communication? How are both entities working together or not?
I would say they are working together, Dave. Of course, originally at the beginning of the space program, it was all government because the private sector didn't have the desire to get involved with something very risky and very expensive. They didn't necessarily have the deep pockets for it as well. And so the government did everything. But with NASA and the same has applied here in Canada as well. There has been cooperation with the private sector. The private sector will only get involved if they see a payoff. Obviously, if there's got to be a business case for it. Otherwise, they're not ready to risk that money. But I would say that there is a very conscious effort between NASA and all of the private sector in the United States. And we do a similar thing here in Canada, and so do the Europeans and others, because now the private sector does see opportunities for them to develop certain capabilities and to get a payoff for it. There's many examples that now exist, but yes, that cooperation is there. Now, there are certain things the private sector won't do. They won't do, for example, some deep space exploration or going to Mars. Even though Elon Musk talks about it, he'll be largely subsidized by the American government when he does that, because that's a little bit, a little bit too expensive and no clear return. So there will always be a role for government, and government will push the envelope in certain research areas. But I think it's become a very productive relationship now between the governments of countries and the private sector.
You just talked about Mars. What is your outlook on sending humans to Mars or having humans settle on Mars?
So I think it's going to eventually happen. I think it has to happen in a very logical way. There have to be precursor missions to make sure that that before you send humans, that there is a good probability that you'll be able to get them there, allow them safely, that they'll be able to do their work on the surface of Mars, possibly be there for as long as a year and a half, and bring them back. We're talking about a 2.5-year round trip, typically. So there's a lot of work to be done in terms of developing that capability. And that's one of the reasons that many spacefaring nations are going back to the moon, because it will be a sort of a test base for a future Mars base. But initially, they'll do it on the moon. The other thing is you have to pre-stage a whole bunch of things before you send humans, because there are a whole bunch of things that have to be there in place when humans finally arrive. They've got to have things like food and fuel and consumables and certain equipment so that they can work while they're there. And then, of course, to have the capability to return. And it's a 6-month trip to go to Mars. That's in the best case, when there's the best planetary alignment between Earth and Mars. So I think it will happen. Initially, there'll be lots of preliminary missions before they feel comfortable enough to send humans. And hopefully that will be an international crew with international participation.
Before we get to others, I've got a question for you, Mark, and it takes us away from Chapter 2, your space agency astronaut time, into your political time. And indeed, it was from a year ago when you retired. I watched on YouTube your address to Parliament on your final day with your family in the gallery. That was lovely, and I was I was very proud, as we've all stated, and I'm very proud to be watching it, proud to be able to call you a friend and a classmate, and actually very proud to be a Canadian. So much so that I sent off the link to YouTube to a few American colleagues that I have, with comments that I won't repeat here, but. What I was particularly struck with, and I'm going to read it here, was in the middle of your presentation, where you said, "To those sitting across from me, your adversaries, not enemies, who all want to make Canada a better place." And you concluded that there is much more that unites us than divides us. You said, "Put away the anger and false indignation," and this was the real kicker for me, "make Canadians proud of this house and the people in it." So I wonder if you could revisit and comment on that vice in the context of the current political climate here in Canada and elsewhere.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, John. I did want to say those words because I felt that during my 14 years as an MP, that the tone in the House of Commons got shriller, and there was more and more heckling. Heckling is not in itself a bad thing if you do it in a certain way. There's actually a respectful way of heckling as opposed to a mean-spirited way and a loud way of heckling. And I can't say that, my acid test was to tell my colleagues that if we, as we often did, have a classroom of young children in the gallery above us during question period, invariably they would come away mystified and perhaps even horrified at the behavior of all these adults down in the House of Commons, shouting at each other and being what I would call disrespectful. So I'm not saying that the House of Commons is a place where everybody sort of has to be sort of totally formal and totally polite and then never sort of say anything provocative. There's got to be some life in there, and I think one of the best ways of doing it is with some humor as well. But I think that things have degenerated, and I'm disappointed, and I'm sorry to say that in the last year since my retirement, I haven't seen any improvements either.
Grant Bristow.
Hey, Mark, how are you doing?
Good,
again,
good, Grant.
We get to meet again. Say, what were you and Cogden thinking about when you were on our YFPs in the Saanich Inlet and decided to go for a swim?
I think we wanted to have a swim. We were very naughty, but I think that story, which I think I may have told at a previous meeting, has been changed a little bit. It was in Pat Bay. And Dave was smart enough not to go for that swim. I went with two other guys. I don't know if you remember Rob Kerr and Mel Lee, both of whom both left the Navy largely because they didn't like what happened to us. But the three of us, one night we were anchored in Pat Bay, and the three of us asked the officer of the watch whether we could go ashore, take a Zodiac ashore, and we really wanted to go to the local Legion, to be honest with you. And he said, no, under no circumstance are you allowed to do that. So we hatched a plot where, to make a long story short, we got in bathing suits and climbed down the anchor chain of the HMCS Beacon Hill and swam ashore, except halfway to shore, two big 20-inch searchlights zeroed in on us as we were making our way ashore, swimming, hiding behind these bags that had our clothes in them. And by the time we reached shore, a Zodiac had been dispatched from the ship to pick us up, and we were brought back to the ship. The whole crew of the ship was there watching us. Most of the sailors were laughing, but not the officers. And the three of us were basically scared within an inch of our life by the commanding officer, who told us he was going to recommend we get kicked out of the Navy for disobeying a direct order. And fortunately, something happened, but they changed their minds. So I spent the next few weeks repainting the Beacon Hill by myself.
As a follow-up, you were the Minister of Foreign Affairs for what, about 9 months or something like that?
Yep.
And I guess there was a shuffle and things like that. And thought you were the guy to represent Canada and move forward. Can you talk about the political background of why either your decision, or was it the politics of well, we got to have 50-50 gender thing or something? I don't know.
So to answer your question, and by the way, I've written a book, and it'll be out in October, where I will go in that in much more detail on that. But to answer the first part of your question, no, it was not my decision to leave that post. The Prime Minister removed me from cabinet, and I'll speak a little bit more about that in the book. I was surprised, because if he had told me before the election, just before the election, I wouldn't have run. My family was wanting me to retire, but he didn't tell me, and he told me after the election, and it hurt. And so, but I'm a big boy. He doesn't have to. He chooses his cabinet and he dismisses his cabinet, and he doesn't have to give reasons for it. And if you're asking me why did he do it, I have no idea. All of my colleagues said they didn't know either, and it was not, in their opinion, due to incompetence or anything like that. But I'll never know.
Yeah. Hey, well.
Anyway, I mean, politics is a blood sport, and it can be that way. And I'm only sorry, because I really had a whole bunch of things I wanted to do at Foreign Affairs, which I never got to do.
Yeah, and you're the guy to think through bigger than just talking points. Thank you.
Personally, I think he thought you were a threat.
Well, I've heard that mentioned before.
Well, it's interesting, Mark, that you put it in the past tense. I have written a book, so it's finished, is it? And off to the publisher?
Yeah, no, if any of you have ever written a book, there's a whole process, and I won't go through it, but the brunt of it is done. And in fact, they coincidentally today, in the online version of the Toronto Star, sort of showed the front cover of it. And so it takes months to sort of page set and paginate and put the index in there and print it, and there's an eight page photo insert and all those little details, but the text itself, that work is complete now.
Great. And October is the expected date.
October, yeah.
Okay. What's the title?
The title is A Most Extraordinary Ride from Space to Politics to living the Canadian Dream. Let me just confirm that.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to submit for your inscription. Mark, and let me ask another question to take us back to where we started all of this, and that is a common experience for all of us, seeing that this is a gathering of classmates. And it is this: if you were, it says in my notes you're 18 again, but I actually know you were 16 when you entered CMR. If you were 16 again, would you go through military college, and if so, why?
So I was 16, and in hindsight, I was quite immature. As you know, a year makes a big difference when you're that age. I was still somewhat rebellious in a number of areas. And if I look back at the experience of going through CMR, and the first year was very tough for me. I am so glad I stuck it out, because it is really, and I'm saying this with the benefit of hindsight and having now written the book and reflected on how my experience at CMR and RMC prepared me for life, because I don't know how CMR, the military colleges are now, because obviously times change and things evolve. But when we went, and I think we'd all agree it was pretty tough, what I came out of it with was, I think, a pretty solid set of core values. You know, the kinds of things that I think are important in life and in everything else that you do. I think, you know, and I wrote some of those down tonight because I anticipated that question. But being there when people counted on you is something that I learned when I was at military college. Keeping my promises is another thing. Being honest and admitting mistakes. I was not that kind of a person when I entered military college. As I say, I was immature and I was a bit rebellious. Being on time. God, I worked with people throughout all my careers, and there's some people who still don't know how to be on time for important things. And I think that that's such an easy thing to do and is so important. Teamwork, of course, because we had to do a lot of things together. And probably the last thing I would say is hanging in there when the going gets tough, because I think we can all relate to moments that we found particularly tough during our time at military college. So would I do it again? You know, it's sort of a tough question to answer. It gave me so much, but I also do remember it being very difficult, particularly in the first year. And I don't know what it's like now. So I wouldn't know what the experience would be like now.
Okay, we're winding down here. I see Dirwyn, did you have your hand up?
Yep. But what's your feeling on where our neighbors to the south are headed?
You know, I spoke a little earlier about how what concerns me most, perhaps in my senior years, is our global issues. The most worrisome global issue for me is what's going to happen to the United States between now and next January the 20th, when the new president is inaugurated. I think so much is going to depend on the outcome of this presidential election. And if Biden wins, which I hope he does, because it's a vote for sanity, will Trump finally recognize and let it be, or will there be unrest? Because he's already fomenting. He's already saying that if he loses, it's because it will have been rigged unfairly against him, just like he did in 2020. So it's very, very concerning. We can talk about all the political challenges that we have here in Canada, and I talked about the fractiousness of the political parties a few minutes ago, but we are a picture of sanity compared to what's going on in the American Congress these days and what's going on the American political scene. And because the United States is the most powerful nation in the world, because we have traditionally looked to it for leadership, it's very, very concerning the way things are going. And you know, I make a prayer every night that Trump is not going to win the day, and that, of course, is by no means assured. So it's a very worrying time. I don't know if a full-blown civil war would break out. I think we can certainly expect some unrest. Trump loses.
Paul Corriveau. Hello, Paul.
Marc, comme professionnel, as a professional, I've done a lot of consulting in various companies, large, small institutions, and so on and so forth. And like you, like me, not like me because I was more stable, but like you, you've been involved in different careers, I may say, and situations. And you had those challenges of being away, of doing your job, being apart away, being away from your family, and so on and so forth. And a lot of them, our friends, do come and ask and see how can we cope with this and that. you yourself, you went through that throughout your whole career. This movement, the fact that you were away. What advice, or based on what you've been through, looking back at it, as a mentor, what would you answer to someone who is challenged by that? And we have adults between 40 and 55 that are going through breakups and so on and so forth, and they find it very, very difficult. So what do you suggest, or how do you perceive, looking back, how do you perceive you would do it or should be looking to it?
Well, it's a very, very good question. In my particular case, you're right. I have done different careers, and these careers put pressure on my family. Being married to an astronaut and having a father who's an astronaut or a mother who's an astronaut can be a little, if the children are old enough to understand what's involved, can be stressful for the spouse and the children. Not so much on a day-to-day basis, but certainly as you get close to a mission, it's one of those moments where they obviously are worried. So that can be difficult. In my political life, when I was an active politician, I was essentially away 6 months of the year. So all that to say that it's very important if you're going to whatever career you choose, or careers, is that you have to do it with your family. You have to make those decisions with your family, and you have to do it, I think, with their permission, their approval, because to make sure that whatever decision, whatever I was drawn to, that I consulted with my family about to see if they were comfortable with me doing that. And I think that's just the way I approach it. Maybe other people would approach it differently. So, and we all have difficult moments in our lives when we can lose somebody. I lost my first wife to mental illness, and that was not easy for her or for my children, who were 10-year-old twins at the time. Or for myself, and my case is not rare. We all face these difficult moments, personal moments in our life, and I think it's very important to be as close as possible to your family, because all sorts of things can happen, unpredictable things, and things you didn't know when you first started off in your marriage, and so. Gosh, I don't think I'm giving you advice that you wouldn't already know, Paul, or anyone else listening in. But those are things that you have to, that can happen in your life, and having your family, being close to your family, helps you, I think, to go through those difficult moments.
Right. Yeah. This is to Mark. It's a little bit more serious note. It deals with our buddy Bob Novitsky. We know we all lost Bob a couple of years ago, and because of the kidney disease and all that. A week before he passed away, I had just by chance called him on the phone, because we typically talk to each other, and he, matter of fact, just said, "Mike, I am." Taking myself off of my dialysis machine, and I'm going to end my journey within a couple of weeks. And he made a statement and says, but Mike, don't tell anybody about this. Now, I knew that Mark and Bob had not talked for quite a while. So I decided that, well, I got to send an email off to Mark about Bob. So I did. And within the same day, and I believe Mark at that time was in Japan, got hold of Bob, and they had, I guess you'd say, their last goodbyes. Subsequent to him passing away, because he went fairly quick, I was talking to Bob's wife, Anna, and she said, one thing he said I got to tell you is that Bob was so pleased and so happy that he had a chance to say goodbye to Mark. Obviously his one of his best friends. They were, I guess, roommates through the tough times in CMR, and like I said, they chummed together all the way for the 4 years. And I know that Anne said that her whole family appreciated the thoughtfulness that Marc had in closing those final few words with Bob. It meant so much to him. Anyways, well done, Marc.
Well, and I want to thank you, Mike, for disobeying Bob and letting me know, because that conversation, I would have felt really, really terrible if I had missed that opportunity. And as you say, within a week, Bob was gone. And so he and I were best buddies. There's no question about it. You knew that. You were with us during that whole time. But we started at CMR together, and that sometimes we all have a best buddy, and Bob was mine, and I'm so glad that you let me know. Thanks, Mike.
Oh, yeah, you're welcome. I mean, I was so happy for Bob. It was just I felt so good that, oh, good, Marc and him finally were able to get together. And Bob was a tough kind of guy, but inside he was just a nice little mellow guy. Yeah, it was good. It was a good final ending. Well done.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. So, Marc, I want to thank you for your generosity and your openness and willingness to come forward and be skewered by us all, even though we're a bunch of, as you say, cream puffs, and there was hardly a roast amongst us. But that's probably indicative of who you are. I got to re-know you over the last while as we put together your nomination for the RMC Wall of Honour. Having done that, and in the times we've had since then, communicating back and forth, putting together, for instance, the MAID presentation that we did a few months back, and in preparation for this, the one thing that I've come to appreciate more than anything else about you, and to me it's quite astounding, is your humility. Despite your amazing accomplishments, over-the-top accomplishments, as we said in the nomination, you could have been successfully inducted under the Wall of Honour a chapter or two back, but you kept going. But despite all of that, you're such a humble person and such a nice guy. It's wonderful to have you as a friend. Well done.
Thank you very much. Thank you, John. Those words mean a lot to me. Thank you, and thank you to everybody tonight for your wonderful words to me, and the companionship that we can still enjoy. 54 years later, and I hope to see every single one of you, because Pam and I have already marked it in our calendar to be there in September 2025, and I'll be joining you in some future Zoom meetings anyway. But thank you again, particularly to John and Paul for organizing, and I think Russ might have had some involvement. I know Russ, if he'd been on, he would have talked about the time we made sake at CMR. Very good sake.
Found yourself on the top of Mount Royal, as I recall.
Au sous-sol du Deliri.
Oui, au sous-sol de Deliri, en plein ça.
Oh God, help us.
Avant de partir, dans la vie, il nous est donné de rencontrer beaucoup de personnes. Certains, on va connaître davantage que d'autres, au plan intellectuel, au plan rationnel, d'autres au plan émotif, au plan du cœur, et ainsi de suite. Dans mon livre, j'en ai rencontré beaucoup, j'en ai commandé beaucoup. Je te considère non seulement un homme de tête, mais un homme de cœur. Capable d'accueillir les autres, d'écouter les autres et de collaborer à leur évolution. Là-dessus, je te dis bravo. Et ça va me faire plaisir de te revoir l'an prochain à Kingston.
Merci beaucoup, Paul.
Pour ta détermination, ta gentillesse, c'est vraiment apprécié.
Merci, Serge.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, Marc.
John.
Take care.
See you next time.
Happy Marc.
À la prochaine.
Merci.